Hello everyone, you are on the channel The Middle Ages. Today we're journeying back in time to an era of soaring castles, gleaming armor, and powerful monarchs who shaped the destiny of nations. This is the Age of Kings, a period stretching roughly from the 5th to the 15th century, where the crown was the ultimate symbol of power, divine right, and sometimes unimaginable turmoil. Forget what you think you know from fairy tales. The real story of medieval kings is far more complex, filled with brutal politics, strategic marriages, and legendary battles that still echo through history. We'll explore how these rulers rose to power, how they wielded their authority, and the incredible legacies they left behind. So sharpen your swords and prepare your banners, because we're about to uncover the truth behind the thrones of the Middle Ages. Let's start at the beginning. After the fall of the Roman Empire, Europe was a fragmented landscape of warring tribes and petty chieftains. It was a chaotic and dangerous time. Out of this chaos, a new form of leadership emerged: the warrior king. Men like Clovis, the first king of the Franks, didn't inherit their thrones peacefully. They carved out their kingdoms with fire and sword. Their legitimacy came not from ancient bloodlines, but from their ability to lead men in battle, to conquer territory, and to reward their followers with land and loot. This was the foundation of the feudal system. A king granted land known as a fief to a powerful lord or baron. In return, that lord swore an oath of fealty, promising to provide soldiers and military service when the king called. It was a pyramid of loyalty, with the king at the very top. But this system was far from stable. Powerful lords often challenged the king's authority, leading to constant internal conflicts and civil wars. A king's reign was a perpetual balancing act. One of the most powerful tools a king possessed was the concept of divine right. The church, which held immense influence over every aspect of medieval life, taught that the king was chosen by God to rule. His coronation was a sacred ceremony, often involving anointing with holy oil, symbolizing that he was God's chosen representative on earth. This gave the king immense moral and spiritual authority. To rebel against the king was not just treason, it was a sin against God himself. This belief helped to legitimize dynasties and ensure that the crown could be passed down from father to son. Think of the Capetian dynasty in France, which ruled for over 300 years. Their longevity was thanks in large part to a combination of political cunning and the powerful endorsement of the church. However, this alliance between crown and cross was often a stormy one. Kings and popes frequently clashed over power, leading to dramatic showdowns, like King Henry IV of the Holy Roman Empire begging for Pope Gregory VII's forgiveness in the snow at Canossa. So, what was a typical day like for a medieval king? It wasn't all feasting and jousting, I can assure you. The king was the ultimate judge, administrator, and military commander. His court was the center of government. He would spend hours hearing legal disputes from his subjects, from the lowliest peasant to the mightiest duke. He had to manage the kingdom's finances, which often meant finding creative and sometimes unpopular ways to raise taxes to fund his armies and his court. War was an almost constant state of affairs. A king was expected to lead his armies from the front, inspiring his knights with his personal bravery. Kings like Richard the Lionheart of England earned their legendary status not just by sitting on a throne, but by fighting in the heart of the battle. The royal court was also a hotbed of intrigue and politics. The king had to navigate a complex web of alliances, rivalries, and conspiracies among his own nobles, who were always jockeying for more power and influence. Of course, we can't talk about the Age of Kings without mentioning some of the most iconic figures. Charlemagne, or Charles the Great, is a towering figure. Crowned emperor on Christmas Day in the year 800, he united much of Western Europe for the first time since the Romans. He was a brilliant military strategist, a patron of learning and the arts, and laid the groundwork for modern France and Germany. Then there's William the Conqueror, the Duke of Normandy, who in 1066 invaded and conquered England, forever changing the course of its history, language, and culture. His Domesday Book, a massive survey of his new kingdom, is an unparalleled historical document. We also have figures like Louis IX of France, later Saint Louis, who was renowned for his piety and justice. He would personally sit under an oak tree at Vincennes to hear the pleas of his people, becoming the very model of a just Christian king. These men were more than just rulers. They became legends, their stories shaping the national identities of their countries for centuries to come. But the power of a king was never absolute. It was constantly being checked and challenged. The most famous example of this is the Magna Carta. In 1215, a group of rebellious English barons forced King John to sign a Charter of Liberties. This revolutionary document established for the first time that everyone, including the king, was subject to the law. It laid out fundamental principles like the right to a fair trial and protection from arbitrary imprisonment. While its initial impact was limited, the Magna Carta became a powerful symbol of liberty and a cornerstone for constitutional law around the world, influencing documents like the United States Constitution. This wasn't a one-time event. Throughout the Middle Ages, institutions like parliaments and estates general began to emerge, giving nobles, clergy, and sometimes even commoners a voice in government, particularly when it came to approving new taxes. The age of absolute, unquestioned monarchy was slowly but surely beginning to wane. The late Middle Ages saw profound changes that would spell the end for the classic medieval king. The 100 Years' War between England and France, while a conflict between monarchs, fostered a new sense of national identity among the common people. Figures like Joan of Arc weren't fighting for a feudal lord, they were fighting for France. At the same time, the Black Death swept through Europe, killing up to half the population. This devastation led to massive social and economic upheaval. Labor became scarce, empowering the surviving peasants to demand better wages and conditions, weakening the old feudal bonds. New military technologies, like the longbow and gunpowder, began to render the armored knight, the backbone of the king's feudal army, obsolete on the battlefield. Cities and a merchant class were growing in wealth and influence, creating new centers of power that were independent of the landed aristocracy. The world was changing, and the role of the king had to change with it. The transition from the medieval to the early modern period saw the rise of the new monarchs. Kings like Louis V of France, Henry VII of England, and Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain consolidated their power in ways their medieval predecessors could only dream of. They created professional standing armies, loyal only to the crown, so they no longer had to rely on their fickle nobles. They developed centralized bureaucracies to collect taxes more efficiently and administer justice more uniformly across their kingdoms. They skillfully used diplomacy and marriage alliances to expand their territory and neutralize rivals. This was the birth of the nation-state as we know it today, with the monarch at its heart, wielding a new level of centralized authority. The age of the feudal warrior king, bound by oaths to his vassals, was over. The age of the absolute sovereign, the embodiment of the state itself, had begun. This set the stage for the grand and powerful monarchies of the Renaissance and beyond. So the Age of Kings was a dynamic and transformative period. It began in the ashes of a fallen empire and ended with the birth of the modern state. It was an era defined by conflict in faith, by personal ambition, and the heavy weight of the crown. The kings of the Middle Ages were not just characters in a story. They were the architects of our world. Their laws, their battles, and their struggles for power laid the foundations for the nations, languages, and political systems that exist today. From the brutal warrior chiefs to the pious saint kings and the cunning nation builders, their legacy is all around us, etched into the stones of ancient castles and written into the pages of our law books. The world they ruled may seem distant, but their influence is undeniable. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey through the Age of Kings. I hope you found it as fascinating as I do. There are so many more incredible stories and characters from this era to explore. Which medieval king do you find the most interesting? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video and want to learn more about the incredible history of the Middle Ages, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel, The Middle Ages. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you won't miss our next adventure into the past. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.